Welcome to AP Euro for Winners.
Today, we are starting Unit 6 and talking about the spread of industry throughout Europe. And we're also beginning our new time frame of 1815 to 1914. So let's start off with a definition of what the Industrial Revolution is. It is a fundamental change in the way goods were made for sale. So we're going to go from goods being made by hands to goods being made by machines. And this is going to cause a lot of social, political, and economic changes around the entire world, but we'll get into all those a little bit later.
So the first thing we need to know is that the Industrial Revolution begins in Britain, and we're going to go through a bunch of different reasons as to why it begins in Britain. And so we got our first three reasons here. So first, if you think back, we have the agricultural revolution that occurred in Britain and also in like Western Europe, but especially in Britain, this is going to lead to an increase in the food supply. And that means with there's more supply, prices are going to come down. So people are going to spend less money on food. And if they have more money left over, they can use that money to buy manufactured goods. So that's the first reason, the agricultural revolution. Number two, Britain is very rich in mineral resources. And this is a good one to just kind of keep in your head. It's kind of an easy one to understand. Why does Britain industrialize first? They got a ton of coal and they have a ton of iron. And those resources are the backbone of the Industrial Revolution. Coal they're going to use for fuel, and iron they're going to be using to produce items, make items out of it. All right. So Britain is a small island with a ton of resources. So it's also very easy to kind of maneuver around Britain, and it's all consolidated, right? They're going to be able to build tons of roads and canals to make transportation of these very easy. So the idea of coal, iron, roads, and canals is kind of an easy one to keep track of. So that's a good one to remember. Third reason the Industrial Revolution begins in Britain is the abundance of markets. And what we mean by that is that Britain has a ton of colonies. If you see pictured here on the bottom, right, we've talked about how the British Empire is huge. There's that old saying, the sun never sets on the British Empire. It's so big. We've talked about imperialism, how they took over all these places. And so what that means is that Britain is able to sell their goods to all these different places in their colonies.
All right, let's go over two more reasons. The fourth one, Britain has a favorable government, and well, I should say, favorable government policies. So Parliament's going to pass laws favoring entrepreneurship. So in 1832, we have the House of Commons, which is part of the Parliament, and it's also the House that represents the working industry people of England. And they actually have the most amount of power in Parliament. And they're going to do really important things. For example, they're going to repeal the Corn Laws, aka the Anti-Corn Law League. And just thinking back, the Corn Laws are these kind of levied steep tariffs on imported grain, so people in Britain had to only buy British grain. Well, removing these allows people to afford cheaper food from outside of Britain, so people don't need to farm as much within Britain. So these people that used to be farmers are now leaving the farms to go to cities to look for other work. The House of Commons also is going to pass more free trade agreements, which is going to make exporting manufactured goods easier and cheaper. The fifth reason that Britain is first is because of the abundance of entrepreneurs and the supply of capital. So entrepreneurship is going to be encouraged. We have previous entrepreneurs in the cottage industry. Think back to kind of Unit 3. There's an image on the right there to remind you, where they got wealthy. People are making money. The manufacturers are making money off it. They have extra money then to invest in more businesses. And these eventually become owning factories. To further this, Parliament is going to create a favorable environment for innovation among its people. More on this next slide. But they want more investors, right? And these investors are those future entrepreneurs. And then lastly, we have banks, and central banks within Britain are going to give out loans pretty easily. We have an example of the Bank of England pictured in the lower right, where if you're getting these loans, you're encouraging these entrepreneurs to take more risks and invest more money in factories.
So the sixth and final reason for why Britain industrializes first is the incentives that are given out for inventors. So in Britain, there's a lot of rewards for creating new technology and new inventions. And there's a couple of examples. So one example to know of is the British Royal Society of the Arts. And they actually give out prizes for new inventions in technology and agriculture. And that's going to make people want to invent new things. And the British government is also doing this. So if you get rewards, you get prizes, more people are going to want to do it. What are some examples of some of those key inventions in the Industrial Revolution? Well, the spinning jenny. invented in 1764 by James Hargrave. This is going to make the production of textiles faster and cheaper. You see that pictured on the top right here. And then the steam engine in 1769, invented by a guy named James Watt. And they're going to use coal to create steam, to turn turbines, and then power machines. That's pictured on the bottom right. And both of these are going to give rise to the factory system.
All right, so Britain just went through all these things. They're industrializing, they're proud of themselves, and they want to show off. How do they do this? They put on what's called the Great Exhibition of 1851. And the centerpiece of this great exhibition was what's pictured here, the Crystal Palace. This is pretty much just this massive structure of steel and glass. It was almost as big as 3 city blocks long. Massive show of power of Britain. It's basically like a World's Fair of all the stuff that Britain can do and make and technology, things like that. And we can see just how this would reflect all of those, the 7 or 6 causes for Britain being industrializing first. Government involvement here, sponsoring these things, massive show of effort, entrepreneurs, technology, all of these things come into the Crystal Palace. So good to know. It's no longer a thing, but still.
And another thing just to be aware of is that because of all these new ways that Britain is industrializing, new industrial cities start to pop up. And one of them is Manchester, England. I like to think like Manchester, England, manufacturing, right? So Manchester, England becomes the first real industrial city. So it's an industrial park. It specializes in making machines to make other machines, right? So obviously, we know in this revolution, you have to have all these machines to produce goods, but what makes the machines? And that's what Manchester, England does. They manufacture the machines to make other machines. So it's a good example to know of in your head.
And we'll go into detail on that next lesson as well. All right, so Britain is industrializing. They're getting powerful, more powerful. They're happy. Well, now we have nearby neighbor France, who also wants to start industrializing, but they're a little bit slow to the start. Right? They don't start until about 1815. They have a lot less coal and iron deposits. Remember, thinking back to Britain, they're an island, they have a ton. France isn't in the same situation. It is important to know, though, we want to kind of go back to Napoleon a little bit, that Napoleon did try to encourage industrialization within France. He helped construct this thing called the Quentin Canal, which connected Paris to northern France, which had all the iron and coal areas. But then he's exiled and during all this time, so not much else could be done there. And then after 1815, the French government is going to start sponsoring railroad construction. And then it leads us into the 1830s, where France adopted all the British weaving technology. And then France adopts that to their own textile production. And they do end up becoming kind of similar to Britain just a little bit later.
And so let's talk more about how industrialization spread and some of the limitations of industrialization in other parts of Europe. So this is a big key thing to know that Southern and Eastern Europe are going to be much slower to adapt and to industrialize. Why? First of all, a lot of these regions lack the mineral wealth that's necessary for industrializing. They don't have the coal, they don't have the iron. These are countries like Spain and Greece, Italy, Portugal. They don't have that stuff. So they're going to be slower to industrialize. Okay. Another reason Southern and Eastern Europe are slower to industrialize is their old economic systems are going to persist. So think back to like the hierarchies of nobles and peasants and the way that the economy was structured all over Europe. Well, because they don't have the resources, they're going to continue this practice of agriculture, of the nobles kind of owning the land and the peasants working on the land. And continuing this primitive practice of agriculture is actually going to cause issues. It's going to cause famines. The most famous one is the Irish potato famine, which is from the 1840s to the 1850s. And in Ireland, a place that does not industrialize very quickly, okay, a majority of the poor population's diet was potatoes. Then there's this disease that comes and hits the potatoes. It's called the blight. It ruins all the potatoes. And that's what most people are eating. So millions of Irish people are dying of starvation, and they have to start moving to other countries like America or Britain. Okay. And then the last idea here is that the elite in Southern and Eastern Europe, they don't really have incentive to support industrialization because remember, they're the nobles. They're the ones controlling the government. They don't want to industrialize because that means they're going to lose all the power. They're going to lose the money. They're going to lose their workers. And the elites are the ones, again, in control of the government. So they aren't going to want all this to happen.
Here are College Board's historical developments. Definitely pause and take a read.
More of them.
Thank you for watching. Shout out to our AP Euro kids. And then we'll see you all for the next video, very similar on the second wave of industrialization.
Until then, bye.